Ask not what we all be can do for you. Ask what you can do for we all be.
Okay, well, why don't we get started here? My name is Mark Robinson, and I have the distinct honor and privilege of serving as chair for this event. I work at Washington State University as the director in the Office of Equity and Diversity. Also have a faculty role there as well. And so when I found out that I was chairing this event, I was definitely excited and a little bit intimidated, to be honest. So I'll try to keep my remarks brief and let you all hear who you actually came to listen to. But of course, just want to introduce these two fantastic individuals, Dr. John H. Bracey, and Professor Sonia Sanchez. Professor Bracey is a department chair and professor in the W.E.B. Du Bois Department of African American Studies and co-director of the Graduate Certificate in American Diaspora Studies at UMass Amherst. Author of several works including Black Nationalism in America, Strangers and Neighbors, Relations Between Black and Jews, African American Women in the Vote, as well as African American Mosaic, a documentary history from the slave trade to the 21st century. So Dr. Bracey will be going first, followed by the fantastic Professor Sonia Sanchez, poet, mother, professor, national, international leader, and I would also add legend, author of 16 books, including Homecoming, We Bad People, Homegirls and Hand Grenades, and many others. A professor of English and Women's Studies at Temple University. So they're going to be talking about their new work, which they wrote along with James Smethurst, called SOS, Calling All Black People a Black Arts Movement Reader. Just newly published this month, if I'm not mistaken.
It's hot off the press.
Hot off the press.
It'll burn your hands when you touch it, people.
So without further ado, I will turn it over to Professor Bracey. Each of them will talk for a half an hour, and then we'll have about 30 to 45 minutes for Q&A at the end.
Yeah, about 40, yeah.
Give him a clap because I told him he doesn't know what it is to hang out. But people like us who interrupt, you know, who say amen, a woman.
Yeah. But I told
and
him to keep the clock though.
Yeah, but you keep the time.
Because we both will go on and on and on.
No, I don't do that.
Of course not. In any case, the book came developed out of a series of conversations that Sonia and I and some of the other artists in the Black Arts Movement have been having about the past 15 years or so, as the scholarship has been developing on the Black Arts Movement. From our point of view, it's gotten further and further away from the reality of what we knew and lived. The dominant view that was in the major anthologies was willful distortions of what happened. Cherry picking of quotations as if to imply that these were major themes. The elevation of writers who I never read or heard of for the most part. And then you have the younger group who assumed that black movement artists black arts movement people were writing for critics. And so they go pick obscure works and give detailed analysis of plays I never saw produced, poetry that wasn't published in my lifetime, or that I didn't know about. And so what you get is a kind of hazy. It's like looking at the Black Arts Movement through a swimming pool. You know, the things look straight, but they're all kind of wiggly by the time you get to the bottom. And so what we thought we would do was to try to capture in one volume, a teachable volume, you know, at a teachable price, affordable in the classroom, affordable for people in the community, to try to reclaim and document what we saw, what we felt, to try to get that piece of the story out. It's not designed to stop people from writing things, but we thought at least people should have our information out there with the competing kind of analyses that are there. We had a unique kind of combination of people. Sonia, of course, was one of the leading artists during the Black Arts Movement. One of the stellar figures of this period. Who, when she showed up in your town or within 100 miles of your town, you went to hear her. A major figure. She was one of the figures who put the voice of black women right square in the middle of the movement, which wasn't there before. We've had lengthy conversations of the meaning of that. And as I've kind of said elsewhere, we assumed as men that when women spoke, they would just be like us, except they'd be women. And we were quite shocked that, in fact, they were talking about things we had never heard of, never thought about. And a good chunk of that was kind of talking about us. And so our response had to be kind of, if you have any kind of honesty, you say, okay, if that's not me, then I'm not, they're not talking about me. But if in fact they're talking about me, then I got two choices: shape up, go into denial or whatever, or say, well, why are you attacking the brothers? Well, if you're wrong and somebody calls you wrong, you're supposed to stop being wrong. That way you won't be attacked no more. I think that's the way I responded. Okay, are you talking about me? Well, yes, I am. Okay, like what do we have to do to change? The key figures who are in the movement have gotten, because they're not, artists in the traditional sense, they're not writers, have been ignored for the most part in the development and understanding of the Black Arts Movement. And what I did, and my kind of piece in it, was I was the audience. Jim is the critic. We drag Jim along because he's going to live longer than us, and we have to keep this thing going. But Jim wasn't alive during the period. He wasn't there, in a sense. He was alive, but not there. I was the audience. The audience was not critics. The audience was not the New York Times. The audience was not the MLA or anybody. I was the audience, right? A young black person who was no longer a Negro, but didn't know what black meant, right? And there are two key figures that you have to know that are foundational to this movement and to black power, black liberation, and black arts. The first figure is Malcolm X, right? People say, what did Malcolm X do? Malcolm X turned Negroes into black people. That's what Malcolm X did. right? My whole first 16 years of my life, I was writing letters to newspapers saying, please capitalize Negro. Please capitalize Negro. Please spell Negro with a capital N. After you hear Malcolm say so-called American Negro, I didn't care how they spelled it. Right? Because I wasn't that no more. You can spell it uppercase, I am no longer a Negro. You can do whatever you want with that word. That's not me. Right? I'm now a black man, right? An African American, an Afro-American. Right? Malcolm did that. Right? Took millions of people and made them into something new. Right? But then Malcolm died in 1965. He was killed in 1965. It's a year before Stokely says Black Power. A year before. Right? Malcolm's not there. Right? How do we know what black means? Who's going to tell us? You know, there are no books. 5 Ways to Be Black, 7 Steps to Blackness. Blackness, you know, turn on the TV and buy a bottle. This will turn you black in 5 minutes, right? We're there. We're young people, you know. Our foundation has been shaken, but then where do we stand, right? And so you look around. My touchstone was John Coltrane, right? Key figure, John Coltrane, right? Because John Coltrane made the same transition. You know, I followed John Coltrane from the time he played with like Sonny Stitt, Gene Ammons, all the way to Miles Davis, you know, snuck into Birdland with a phony ID, right? Followed him to a monk, you know. Was at Randall's Island in 1959 when he first played My Favorite Things. First time I'd ever heard him play a soprano saxophone. I came all the way from the top seats, walked all the way across the grass. Police didn't stop us to see, like, what is he playing? What is that sound? Right? But I didn't know what it was, but I knew that this was it. This was it. That this is where we're gonna go. Right? And then you watch Coltrane, right, systematically attack the foundations of kind of Western music and culture, destroy it. Take away the harmony, take away the melody, take away the rhythm, and then build beauty out of nothing. Pure sound, right? He said, no, you could throw away the Negro part, but there's something on the other side that's just as good, better, right? And Coltrane was that figure, right? You know, so you followed him. As in public, he changed your mind. You know, as I tell people, I never took my girlfriend to see Coltrane. You take her to see Miles, because Miles is cool. Coltrane is work. You don't go to be entertained by John Coltrane. You go to John Coltrane because you have to follow him. You're working with him. You're shouting with him. When he runs out of notes and he takes that upper register and he's doing those overtones and he takes the horn down and starts beating on his chest, right? You're with him. You're hollering at him. He's speeding off of you, right? You're going somewhere. He's reshaping your head. Like Coltrane is the key. Coltrane dies in 1967. 1967. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? Right? That's when the artists come in. That's what this book is all about. The people that lay out the foundations and try to take us through that transition are poets and dramatists, writers, right? They stand up in front of us and say, you know, this is what we bees about, right? This is existential talk, you know. What does it mean to be black? You know, your Haki saying, like, you know, he thinks that being black is cool. No, being black is hot, right? You know, so we have to move through that period, and it's the artists that guide us through that. The key figure, which is why we named the book after his poem, is Amiri Baraka, right? You know, anybody say anything about Amiri Baraka, he is one of the major figures in 20th century American culture. You don't let white people talk trash about him and believe that stuff, right? He's one of the greatest dramatists, one of the greatest poets, one of the greatest essayists. The first book of jazz criticism is Blues People, still one of the best, probably still the best. It is. Right? He put Malcolm and Coltrane on his back, and it's a small back. He didn't have a big back. He's a tiny little guy, right? Moved from the village to Harlem. Started Black Arts Repertory Theater and said, we're going to work this out. Y'all come with me, right? Gwendolyn Brooks, who was doing fine. Judith Surprise, all that stuff. Said, I'm leaving Harper and Row. And I'm going to Broadside. Well, what is that? I don't know, but we're going to make something out of this, because this is black. I'm not a Negro poet no more. I don't want to be. The pages may be white, but that's the only thing white I'm dealing with. Right? And she goes to Broadside, everybody else got to move. If Gwendolyn Brooks is giving up those kind of royalties, that kind of fame, to say, I'm going to step with you and guide you, you got to go with them, you know. When we started our Negro History Club at Roosevelt University, we later changed the name to Du Bois Club. We asked Gwendolyn Brooks to come say something so we'd be legitimate. We wouldn't have been legit. You know, in Chicago, nothing moves without Gwendolyn Brooks. You know, she called up, she answers her own phone. You know, Miss Brooks, will you please come down and say something because we're trying to start a Negro History Club and we'd like you to say something. She said, well, I don't talk much, can I come read some poems? At this point, I'm throwing the phone up. You know, yes, ma'am, you can do whatever you want. We don't have any money. She don't need any money. It's not about money. You know. She came down on the L, walked in, read some poetry and said, this is a fine effort. We were legit. That's Chicago. Women, black women defined what we did in Chicago. Gwendolyn Brooks, Margaret Burroughs, Christine Johnson. You know. And so we had guidance, you know, as we're beginning to move. People standing in the place of Malcolm and Coltrane, you know. And so it's messy because there's no blueprint, right? We're mad about stuff, right? So there's a lot of language, you know. I don't, you know, if you look at the film they're doing on Sonia, I read Sonia's motherfucker poem. Everybody had to have a motherfucker poem.
But tell them the conclusion.
Yeah, the conclusion of that is not that you said all that, just get to work. Right? Because there were a lot of people, people that thought they were poets who would stand up on the platform and just cuss white, you know, black, they say black. Okay, I got it. We gotta do better than that. But what was important about this was the high level of craftsmanship of these artists. They weren't all the same. Just like if you say jazz, it's not all the same. Miles is not Coltrane, it's not Monk, you know, it's not Sonny Rollins, right? So Sonia doesn't sound like Baraka, doesn't sound like Haki, doesn't sound like Jahavi Amin, right? Doesn't sound like Askia Touré, you know, doesn't sound like Willie Cosette-Sealy. There are a range of voices, you know, skill craftsmen. Ed Bullen's plays you have to think about. They're harsh, they're not pretty. It's not Raising in the Sun. You know, Claire's old man, the same town, but it ain't the same thing going on. You know, so we're trying to think our way through that. That's what we wanted to document. Right? We wanted to capture that kind of messiness and confusion. Right? And people talk about spoken words, so you take the sounds, and these plays were put on in high school auditoriums. Right? Or in a vacant lot where you get a couple of lights and you throw them up against the wall, you know, and you get, you know, the guys that really knew the art stuff, and you get the brothers standing and sisters standing and say, come on, we need 3 people to be this, you do this, you stand over here, you stand over here, and read these lines. Right? And the audience had to validate you. Right? If they weren't shouting at you, talking with you, then crank it up. You know, you're going to say, make it plain, break it down. You know. This was not something about aesthetics for aesthetics' sake. This is about calling us from being something to something else and working our way through, you know, to how to walk our way in a new world, right? How do black people act? What do we do, right? And the women said, how do you relate to women? Which again, we had thought about, you know, people accused the movement of being sexist, but the whole country was. Like, well, we're no different from anybody else, right? But we talked about it. Right? What other movement in this country talked about the relationship of black men and women? What other movement? Right? SCLC? No. Right? You know, it was them Baptist preachers that kept James Baldwin from talking at the March on Washington, not Malcolm X. Malcolm X stood on the platform with Jimmy Baldwin in Harlem. Who's homophobic? Like, come on with it. Hoyt Fuller was gay that stopped nobody from sending and stuff to black world. Like, come on. You know, there's a lot of stuff dumped on black artists because we talked about those things. We engaged those things. Sisters called us out. I went to school with Carolyn Rogers and Rhonda Davis. They ate you alive at the lunch every day. Carolyn would say, I got a new poem, you want to hear it? Can I eat first? Because I know you're coming at me. And I said, Carolyn, like, are we that bad? She said, yeah, but I'm working on getting y'all right. Like, I didn't say I don't want to talk to you. Get away from me. She's bringing stuff that was on. One of Carolyn's best poems, because the brother started the Dog Sisters in the Name of the Struggle, and I guess I can say this because y'all are grown-ups. Carolyn had a poem say, the next time a brother say, give him some for the revolution, tell him go fuck himself. Right? That's Carolyn Rogers. Right? She read that in an audience of 2,000 people. Right? I'm saying, Carolyn, should you cuss like that in public? You said, was I incorrect? No, you're right. You're right. That's what we try to capture. Right? We try to capture that messiness. We try to capture that movement, that kind of chaos, but there's great, great beauty in the Black arts movement. These are great artists. Great artists, And so we wanted to get all that in there. There are a lot of organizations that overlap, so we also include the manifestos of everybody from the Black Panther Party, Revolutionary Action Movement, to UMBRA, right? Black Arts South, right? They weren't separate. That false division, like the cultural nationalists over here, political nationalists over there, people made that stuff up. Part of it's my fault. I did a book called Black Nationalism, and we had different kind of categories. Nobody thought that was real. This is just so you could get the documents lined up. Don't confuse the words with the reality. Come on. Right? Politics was cultural. Cultural people had politics. As I say in my essay, if you didn't like John Coltrane, I didn't want to talk to you. I don't care what your politics were, because you didn't have none. Now, you didn't have to listen to everything about Coltrane, but if you did not like John Coltrane, then you were suspect in my eyes. You could like Coltrane plus, because I did. I like Coltrane plus B.B. King, plus Howlin' Wolf, plus Smokey Robinson, plus Marvin Gaye. But Coltrane is in that mix. He's not jazz over here, jazz out there, jazz esoteric. No, he's the one that's driving that. It's Coltrane that opens up the length of a song. Songs are like 3 minutes, so you can get a Wonder Bread in between, right? My favorite thing is 13 and a half minutes. Right? 13 and a half minutes. They played that on the radio, 13 and a half minutes. And they could still sell Wonder Bread. Right? After that, then you get Isaac Hayes, right? And Barry White, all that long drawn out stuff. Without Coltrane, that's not happening. Right? He said, no, you can give a lot, you can string out some black music and still make money on the radio with it. Coltrane did that. Right? Because nobody wanted to chop my favorite things up into little parts. He said, no, I want the whole 13 and a half minutes. That's his impact, right? Said, you don't have to stand up on the stage in a suit and tie and look like you're off instructed. You can get up there with like a loose shirt with no tie, and you can sweat. Miles is looked and sweat. Martin Jazz Quartet barely moved. They came out in tuxedos and Milt Jackson. I loved them. They didn't sweat. And then they bowed, don't like that. Elvin Jones has got, don't sit in front of Coltrane's back. And Elvin Jones has got sweat flying off. He got drumsticks. He goes to 10 pair. Literally, he got 10 pair of drumsticks. Coltrane is doing the spit valve thing, so do not sit in front. Right? And there's a lot of sweat, right? And there's a lot of towels being used. The white people off in the middle of the piece because the pieces ran 40, 45 minutes. Right? Because you're working your way through stuff. We try to capture some of that messiness. The poetry section has a section of poems on Coltrane and a section of poems on Malcolm. Because that's who you had to grapple with. And these artists know that. People try to put them in separate books. No. You had to deal with the founders, and those artists knew it. What I'm talking about is where they were coming from too. And that's captured in here. We had a good time selecting stuff. The book could have been twice as long, but then nobody would have published it. But we got them to give us about 600 some pages, and the impact. And I'll say what Jim would say if he was here. There are a lot of people that try to make like the Black Arts Movement didn't happen, or that it went away after a few years, and that everything after that is somehow different from that or better than that, and so forth. The Black Arts Movement made art a public phenomenon, right? For the first time since the 1930s with the WPA work, right? The criteria, right, was not the New York Times Book Review, right? Criteria was not New York Review of Books. It's not MLA Journal. It was not Helen Benlow or people like that. Right? The criteria was that people in your neighborhood like it, And when you went to a concert, like you go to a concert, you know the words to all the songs. But we went to poetry readings, we knew the words to all the poems, And so when Nikki Giovanni would say, like, I'm so bad, even my errors are correct. Right? Or Hakeem would say, he's so cool, he even stops for green lights. Hey, And my favorite, Bavaka, when he's like, calling, the black people, so my favorite is like, up against the wall, motherfucker, this is a stick up. Right? And that's in the middle of that poem where Bavaka, you have to see, and this is visual stuff, you have to see him. He's banging on the podium, he's stamping his foot, you got 2,000 people in the audience, done by High School Auditorium, and he's chanting these words. You can take it, it's all, you can make it, all you gotta do is say the magic words. 2,000 people jump up and shout that. 2,000 people jump up. That's the criteria. Are you addressing, right, the needs of your audience? Right? And that's what we have in here. Those poems that do that. We don't pick people because they had pretty stuff. There are a couple in like that. We got Joe Gonsalves who writes in circles. And I still can't, you got to turn the book around to read. So I don't know what you do when that's live, but we picked stuff that had an impact, that people heard. We picked plays that were put on, that we saw. And Jim would say, this is a great play. I said, yeah, I never saw that play. I don't doubt it's a great play, but it's a piece of paper, right? I saw Black Mass. I saw Dutchman. I saw The Bronx Is Next. I saw Clara's Old Man. So if it's there and it's in front of you, then you're engaging with it. If you ever saw Black Mass, the audience is screaming. Y'all know Black Mass Baraka, right? The Yakub thing. Where at the end, the monster comes off the stage and he's spewing crap all over the audience, just green slime. And black people want to jump the monster, but you're not supposed, it would have messed up the play. But because he's coming through the audience, with just gray stuff on, spewing all this crap. And, Yakub on the stage said, don't worry about it. He's going up to the north. He's going to die out. Everybody said, no, man, that's the white man. He's coming back. Right? This is real. This stuff is not up there. It's like real. It's in you. It's around you. Right? That's how you know a play was good. That's how you do it. When you're grunting and talking and chanting with the play. That's what we try to capture in here. These are examples of that kind of work. And I think we were successful in doing that. That impulse is still here. People try to deny it, right? But if you listen to, and we pick up, we have the last portion here, niggas are scared of revolution. I'm not going to read none of that. And you have the revolution will not be televised, Gil Scott-Heron. This is music. This is music and words all, combined together, right? And that impulse carries on, into the 80s and so forth. Hip-hop begins in the 70s, remember?
That's right.
70s, it's not that long time ago. Black Arts Movement, leads into the early 70s, right? You get Last Voice,
Mid-70s.
Gil Scott-Heron, Terry Collier, right? And then you got hip-hop, right? Words, music, and early hip-hop comes right out of black arts. Talking about KRS-One, Public Enemy, Brand Nubian, We Righteous Teachers, Arrested Development, right? Comes right out of there. It's all, 5%ers, Class 13X and all that, right? And it's only later, when the white establishment sees that this stuff is coming, that then you go out to the West Coast and get straight out of Compton. Cop Killer, right, who now plays a cop. Right? And think about that. Right? Dr. Dre just bought a mansion for like $40 million. Well, Chuck D ain't got no $40 million mansion. And not gonna get none. Neither is Talib Kweli. Right? They ain't gonna give him that kind of money. Right? No. The establishment knew that this was still powerful and still moving through the culture. And so they tried to block it again. So no, this is what hip hop is. No, it's not that 5% of black consciousness stuff. No. This is about, spliffs and hoochie, mamas and women up there with their behinds hanging out, and everybody smoking a spliff, Snoop Dogg and all like that, pimps and hustlers, and young people think that's hip hop. No, but underneath that, and what we try to capture, we have James Spady's essay in here, Nation Conscious Rap, from Nation Conscious Rap. It shows that it's continuation. Down to the younger people like Talib Kweli and Common, Jessica K. Moore, and so forth. So it's still there. And don't let people tell you that it died and went somewhere. That it's no longer there. It didn't have an impact. It had a tremendous impact. Still has a tremendous impact. The response we're getting, for the book already, indicates an impact. You don't have to go get 5 little paperbacks and a whole bunch of Xeroxes to teach the Black Arts Movement no more. Right? If you could find the stuff in the library, if you could, get inside of Yale or Harvard somewhere and get into the esoteric collection of black memorabilia and so forth. If you know somebody that has Xerox of the original documents and so forth. No, we got it here. You don't have to go looking for it anymore. So if you want to teach the Black Arts Movement, you can use this. You know, we fought to get money to keep the price down. The price is $35 for this big fat book. $35. You know, we just said a penny over that, black people ain't gonna buy it. $35. Yeah, I know my people, but I ain't spending 35. I'll bet 35 gets you what, a bottle of Cristal or something like that. Wow. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's what the trade. You know what the trade-off is? Do I get this or I go out the black dog movie? So sacrifice the bottle of Cristal and get this right. And that's what we were trying to do. That's what the book is about. It was a wonderful thing for me because I'm the audience, you know. I'm the one that's listening to artists and being moved by artists. And I wanted to have something that, and I have a piece in the back that talks about my own kind of relationship with these things. The people that helped me navigate going from Negro to black, you know. And I was fortunate enough, you know, because, you know, Sonia came to Amherst when we were fighting to get black studies. To meet, you know, the artists who were doing these things. I mean, they're tremendous people. They're skilled, talented people. You know, they're not lunatics. They're not crazy people. They're not anti-Semites. They're not homophobes. Right? You know, they're not destructive people. They're builders. You know, they write with great care and beauty. You know, they spend a lot of time on their craft. You know, you can tell good poetry versus bad poetry. You can tell a play that makes sense versus a play that doesn't make sense. And so it's been a wonderful experience for me, you know. And we dedicated the book to Baraka. We got a picture, you know. Amiri was up at, we had a conference on the Black Arts Movement at UMass about 3 years ago. And so you know, we had a picture of Amiri on the dedication page. We were going to dedicate it to him anyway. But this is the picture last time he was at UMass, you know, cracking on people. You know, I mean, and that's the other thing. You know, these are great people. You know, these are gentle people. You know, you meet Abiodun, he's a gentle person. You know, these are people that love black people. Right? These are people that didn't make a lot of money doing what they did. Right? These are people that risked their lives and jobs doing what they did. Well, Amir Bavaka didn't get tenure at Rutgers University. Think about that. You could take the combined English department at Rutgers University, you don't know who they are. All of them. Right. Add up their combined productivity, they don't add up to 1/2 of what Amir Bavaka does in a couple of years. Right? They denied him tenure. I mean, think of the arrogance of that. The arrogance of that. Right. You know, Sonia got run out of New York.
Liberal New York.
Run out of New York. She's one of them, but you don't talk about it. He said, no. You can talk that stuff, just don't do it. No, I got brothers on the case. I like that. You gotta have order. Yeah. No. There were prices to be paid. You know, part of what we did in Black Studies was to try to create a space where we could save people. You know, the people we hired in our department, we hired people out of the movement. You know, we got Bill Strickland because the Institute in Atlanta was getting battered around. I got Ernie Kawamoto out of the League of Revolutionary Black Workers. You know, Ernie said, they're coming after us. I said, oh, you want to teach black history? He said, I haven't taught it before. Well, be some books on the train cutting there. You know, no, smart people, but not traditional academics. You know, in Northwestern, the first person we had was C.L.R. James. Right? They still haven't put his picture up in Northwest. Where's Dolly? They put his picture up here yet? Y'all got to get James's picture up here yet. They be in severe denial. And
we'll come and put it up
we'll
for
put
you.
It up. They make like it started with Leon Forrest and Lerone, where James was the first one. And James, you know, we had to fight to get him in the country because he was on every list that you had about not getting in the country. And we had to have Gwen Carter go to the State Department to get him his first permanent visa so he could actually come in the U.S. and stay a little while. That's who we wanted. Not because he was a great academic, because he was a great revolutionary. That's what we wanted.
Great mind.
Yeah. Like, how's this thing supposed to work? We got the black part, where's the revolution part? That's what Black Studies was about. It wasn't about training academics. We do that now because there's no movement. Y'all get a movement, we can train revolutionaries. And that's on y'all. See, we already did our part. We got the space for you now. Y'all just got to use it.
And hold it.
Use it. Hold it. Right? Because if you don't fight for it, you may not have it. You know, I mean, they're sitting there counting the days as we all get out of the way, right? Hoping that the younger people, you know, are not us. You know, hoping that they believe in this stuff, you know, so that they keep doing, you know, what they want you to do and not what you came there to do. You know, and so we try as best as we can to train our young people, our students here at UMass anyway, to think collectively.
Yeah.
To not compete with each other, to help each other. Right? You know.
John, could I just say one more thing about C.L.R. James?
Oh, yeah.
Because he was brilliant.
Yeah.
And so there is no conflict between being a great intellectual and a committed revolutionary.
And how?
Right, well, that's what Black Studies
We
was.
gotta put those two things together.
Yeah, that's what Black Studies was.
At the beginning.
Yeah, that was the whole point. You wanted, and that's why we did interdisciplinary department. So our department started off, you know, it's the artists that made our department. It's the artists that made Black Studies in the Pioneer Valley. You know, when they hired me, coming down the hall the first day, is Max Roach. Nobody knows who I am. Everybody knows who Max Roach is. Got 1 minute now. And they got Archie Shuck, Paul Carter Harrison, Nelson Stevens, and Nelson's on every book we do.
Yeah, isn't that a great picture?
Right? First-rate artists, because it's the art that helped us with the transition. We wanted to institutionalize space for the artists. Right? And we hope that bringing this book out will get people to see, like, these are great people. If they're still around, go see them, go hear them. Buy their books, buy their CDs, right? Listen to them, you know, because the black thing that we had is kind of shaky now. And Negroes out there don't talk to each other, they're killing each other. They're high all the time, they treat women like in a horrible, horrible way. You know, this stuff that's on the TV now, it's like, I still don't understand why somebody ain't jacked up Ray Rice. Your brother hitting the system, man. Like, how come you walking around? How come ain't no brother? Where's her brothers? Where's her uncle? Or somebody go with a baseball bat and say, hey, come on, I want to talk to you. You want to hit somebody? No, I mean, that's wrong. What, because he's a celebrity? No. You know, and our family, we ran a dude into, you know, Lake Michigan because he hit one of my cousins, you know.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. You saw the case?
Thank you.
You can sue me if you want. All I'm saying is that there's a set of values that go with this, that we want to get the values back. You know, the values back. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. That's what's missing, is the values we were trying to hold. And that's what the society wants you not to have back.
Exactly.
Right? A love of black people everywhere. Not just crap about who speaks French or Spanish and what island you can, all that crap. Black is black. Slaves are slaves. You're from African descent. You came here under hard times. I don't care how you got here. You're under hard times. You come from Africa, you a nigga when you get here. If you ain't found it out the first week, you find it out the second week. I like it. We're going to turn it over to Sonia.
We want to definitely give time for Dr. Sanchez as well, but thank you, Dr. Bracey, for those words.
It is. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to have done this book. Because, as John said, I kept, every time I saw him, I would say, you know, we really need to do that book on about the black arts, because I get tired of having to go in and lecture every time someone is teaching, you know, black arts. We need a book. And the great thing about saying stuff like that to John, eventually he looks up and said, okay, Sonia, okay. And he said, I got it. And he went right to the department, you know, and to that school and got an okay from the press, you know. And the moment that happened, you know, we all met in my house for the next 3 years to get it done. And we fought over it. I mean, we couldn't put in, and then we cut. I mean, we had a book that I finally said, we got 2 books. And he said, no, we don't, Sonia. We don't have 2 books. We got 1 book. And that was the problem when we began to excise, you know, and cut and cut and cut. But I think we have the real essence of that period. And as he also said, too, that we really did not, come up with this out of like some magic wand, because there were people before us who really began to talk about this, and we're talking about people like Fannie Lou Hamer, because the people who helped start the first black studies in San Francisco State, when we got there and looked and realized, here I am with, what's the brother's name, who headed it? The sociologist.
Nathan Hare.
Nathan Hare, right? I said, I'll get the people. So we called back and got SNCC people, because we knew, one, they were bright, they were educated, and they were strugglers, whatever. You got to hear that, and they came piling in, and there we were with the core people. But we had Ella Baker, who had faith in young people. I'm just saying this to make it go faster, because otherwise I'll elaborate too much. We had John Lewis in his speech on the March on Washington, who said, I want to know which side the federal government is on. Come on, people. Right away, that's the jumping off. And people, Ella Baker, who said, we are going to have to learn to think in radical terms. I use the term radical in its original meaning, getting down to and understanding the root cause. That's Ella Baker. So all of a sudden we're hearing this, and so we began to fill up our books on people. And in late 1965, you got to realize we are going now after the assassination of Malcolm, but after he is also killed, we're going into the black arts, because a man by the name of Leroy Jones and later on Amiri Baraka sent letters to us saying, come on, help us to continue the work of Malcolm. So we were AMs after Malcolm. We were the children of Malcolm, people. We knew we were children of Malcolm. We were ready. And so there we were in a place, and he comes uptown with some of the people from the village, right? And they would buy a brownstone, and there we are, beginning something called BART. It's amazing. It's an amazing moment. I heard one Sunday afternoon the great, I've been getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning traveling, so you have to forgive me when that happens. I leave out names. Max Roach and Abby Lincoln. I heard the great Abby Lincoln say, who will revere the black woman? Ooh. And we're sitting there there were about 25 women this Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. And Abby Lincoln walks in with her short natural, right? And we're looking at this woman, and she begins to talk about the black woman. Who will revere the black woman? And we sat there and cried that whole afternoon, asked her questions, and began to move in a different level. I wrote up the curriculum for, what we would teach the children, there, as we brought them in on Saturday afternoons and Saturday mornings, took them out of those brownstones to begin to teach them all kinds of things at some particular point. That was the kind of movement. But this woman, and then late 1965, after the death of a man by the name of Brother Malcolm, she said, when we elected our Freedom and Democratic Party, their representatives to go to the National Democratic Convention in Atlantic City, we learned the hard way that even though we had all the law, listen to this, Fannie Lou, we had all the law and all the righteousness on our side, the white man is not going to give up his power to us. She said that. We read this. Now we're moving from a point that Malcolm is dead, right? And all of a sudden, people are speaking out on the level. And here we are. I'm in the place after we move away, because there were problems with that happened with the black arts, with BART. For instance, Barbara Hamilton and myself were writing up, as I said, things that need to be done. And we were at some point threatened as women. We were called bougie bitches, But we were busy writing up stuff, and some people said, you don't know true revolution. And then people would bring us down in a building with a gun and put the gun down and said, we would teach you what real revolution is about. Well, it happened once, but when it happened the second time, I looked at Barbara and said, no, I got to remember my grandmother on this, you know what I mean? She said, you can let people do something to you once. You can let people do something to you twice, like hit you, pull guns on you, whatever. But if it happens a third time, it's on you. And so after the second time, Barbara, and there's another sister, I'm blanking on her name, we started meeting out in the park around there and to finish up the program. But I also moved away because I was by myself, and it was, when you're by yourself sometimes it's more, it's more dangerous. Barbara had a husband, and many other women had husbands there too, but I didn't have that, so I backed away and said, let me just move away, give you all the work I've done. And I went out the country. I went first to a place called California, and then I took a slow train. I took a slow train into Mexico City. And I was walking down El Paseo de la Reforma, and I heard some people say, Miss Sanchez, 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 from a bus. And I said, oh God, even in Mexico City. And I kept on walking. And these young people came bouncing off the bus and said, we have been writing you. We're going to start something called Black Studies. And I said with my smart mouth, if you're going to call it black anything, because by then I was really out of my head, it'll fail. And he said, well, can we hang out with you? And I said, well, yeah, I'm going to go climb the pyramids, I said, so we can do this. And we hung out together. And they said, you got to come out because we're told you're the one who can do the black lit. I said, yeah, I can. I recommend black literature to everybody and their mama, whatever, etc. But I said, I am not coming to California. I said, you do know who is governor out there, Reagan. And so, make a long story short, I went on and climbed the pyramids and went up there, and I did breathe some air. I came back down and made my way back home to a place called New York City, and I would get a call, every day almost about these young students who were forming the BSU. You got to come. We need you. We're on the brink of really doing something that's important. And they said, we're coming to New York in December. Will you take us to go over to meet, never think of his name, Leroy Jones. I can't think of the slave name, And I said, I can do that. I'll take you over there. So we went over, and we stayed up with Larry Neal and Brother Baraka in that house. And then we decided we're going to do this. It was just decided like 3 o'clock in the morning, we're going to go out. Baraka was going to bring out and be the part that would do the theater part. You know what I'm saying? Whatever. And the rest of us would come out and we begin the teaching part of it. And when I told my father I was going to a place called California, he screamed, he said, you don't know California. Why are you leaving? You have a rent-controlled apartment. I did. A rent-controlled apartment in a place called New York. So you don't give that up, he said. And you don't give it up, really. And I went out there, and when we got out there and began that process, the president reneged and said, I didn't say we were going to have black studies at all. So we taught the first semester without getting paid. We had to get another job. I got a job teaching in high school, but the university is a corporation. Don't think it's a place where they educate, okay? And because it is a corporation, when they saw all these people who came, people came to that class, those classes, and we had in the class, people, 60 people looking at you, then people sitting in the hallway, in chairs that they brought, sitting around, and those classrooms had those blackboards that would go all the way around. When I came in, never talk sitting down. When I came in, I wrote on the board, names of all black folks. The only 2 names they recognized, Martin and Malcolm. Not Du Bois, not Langston, not Paul Robeson. It's an amazing moment in history. But by the end of that semester, they knew him. And here we were, and you're talking about people reading, and we didn't have the books, so we memoed. My hands were forever blue and purple, we memoed. But I had gotten those books from a woman by the name of Jean Hudson, who was a curator at the Schomburg. And what did Miss Hudson do? When I, as a 19-year-old, had just graduated from college, from Hunter, and was going to NYU, and went out looking for a job, went downtown I answered an ad in the newspaper, went downtown to get the job, right? I got there at 8:30. They say, please arrive at 9 o'clock so we can see you and you can sign papers, whatever, etc. I was getting a job as a writer for a firm. You ready for that? I took that telegram and said to my father, see, I can get a job writing. And my father looked at me and said, well, you're probably going to be a teacher like me. And I said, no, I'm going to get a job writing. Look at this. I got there at 8:45. Someone came and looked around. Another guy came out, and about 10:02, a guy came out and said yes. And at that time, they sent telegrams. So I took out the telegram and said, like that, please report to work, right? You were hired. And the guy looked at the telegram, looked at me, looked at the telegram, looked at me, looked at the telegram, looked at me. And he just stared like he couldn't, really convince himself that the person that they had read, I had sent samples of my writing, but they had read that they had hired me. You ready for that? And he said, I'm sorry, the job is taken. And I said, oh, no. I said, no. I said, I got it. New York humor, New York City. I said, I came too early. You said, get here at 9 o'clock. I'm going outside. And I'll come back in at 9 o'clock, right? And we can start all over again, right? God looked at me like, and he said, the job is taken. I said, I'm going to report you. I'm going to report you to the Urban League. And he shrugged his shoulder and said, lady, so what, right? And I left. I was so mad. I had put on my blue suit, my blue heels, I had my blue purse, my white gloves, and my blue hat, and it wasn't sitting acey-deucey. I had my hat on. I took off everything, got on this bloody subway. And if you know New York City subways, you got to get off at 96th Street. If you don't get off that train, it'll take you over to the east side. And I'm sitting there really still just mad. And the door closed and I realized I had overstayed my time on that train, and we were moving over to 110th Street, and the train is shaking as usual, But I get off at 135th Street. Crossing, have to walk back down to the Urban League, and there's a sign that says Schaumburg. Now, I've been in a place called New York City, never knew about the Schaumburg, never went to the Schaumburg, didn't know it existed, and this guy's outside smoking, one of the guards, and I said, what is the Schaumburg? He said, lady, go inside and ask. There's a woman inside, just sign in, right? And I went inside, and the old Schaumburg people, was this long room, but they had this long table, and nothing but men sitting there, men from overseas, all scholars, right, with books stacked up like that. And there was a glass door, and I knocked on the glass door, and I said, Miss Hudson opened the door, and I said, I introduced myself, and she said, oh, my name is Miss Jean Hudson. And I said, what kind of library is the Schaumburg? She said, oh, my dear, it's a library that has books only by and about black, she said, Negro people. And I said with my smart mouth, there must not be many books in here. I brought all my students, when I started to teach, wherever we were, we went to the Schaumburg every semester. People would tell you that. They went in to do research. You would not come to a class of mine without knowing the Schaumburg. And every time I brought them, she would be standing up front, and I get in the back, because I knew. She said, oh, thank you. Professor Sanchez always brings her students to me. It's a joy, from Amherst College, wherever I was, from Temple University, then New York City. She said, I'd like to tell you a little story about your professor. And I started backing up towards the door. And she told that story. How students go, ooh, yeah. I said, yeah, I did that. The point of all that is that she sat me down and said, I want to give you some books. And 20 minutes later, I was sitting there, she eased me in between all these men, right? And I sat there. 20 minutes later, she brought 3 books. Up from Slavery, Souls of Black Folk, and Their Eyes Are Watching God. She said, you're going to start reading these books. And on top, Their Eyes Are Watching God. You know how it takes you a minute to get accustomed to the black English? Do not, if you're teachers, it is not dialect. We're not speaking dialect, people. That's black English, okay? Remember that, black English. But the ear wasn't accustomed to it, right? So I, and the eyes, so I had to I struggled for a minute. But then after I read about it, I eased out again and I knocked on the door. I had tears in my eyes. I said, how could I be an educated woman and not read this book? She said, oh, don't you worry, dear. I'm going to give you lots and lots of books, And so I went back and eased in again. And I started to read. As I read, I started to cry as I read. The beauty of that book, people, the beauty of that book. And I got out again and I knocked on the door. She said, yes, dear. I said, no. I'm going to be going to school, again, graduate school. I said, here I am. I've never even heard of these people. And she said, oh, my dear, I'm going to give you books and more books and more books and more books and more books. And I went back to ease in, and this African said, Miss Hudson, tell this young woman either she sits still or she has to leave. And I sat still for the rest. I was supposed to be out looking for a job. I told my dad every day I'm going out looking for a job, right? That whole spring, summer, I'm serious. And I was filled with books. And then one day she said, I'm sending you someplace when I showed up. And she sent me to Mr. Michaud and Richard Moore. Two black men that had two black bookstores on 125th Street. That's why I don't go into that government building there, because that's where, those black bookstores were okay. And, I always had trouble going in there, because too many ghosts. If I put my foot in, the ghost said, what are you doing in here, Sonia? I have to back out, right? Because we picketed that place, because they tore that down. But I went to Mr. Michaud, and I told him I'd come, and he said, oh, Miss Hudson, oh, yes. And he had a paper bag full of books. Pain, all the books I had read there, all those books, people. First edition, you got to hear that, I went to Mr. I had to go home with that, and I came back the next day for Mr. Moore, and Mr. Moore was a different case. So his bookstore was narrow, and I used to say you had to go in sideways to get in his bookstore. That's a lie, but it was still small and narrow. And he was like, who are you? And I'm an ex-stutterer. I almost went, I remember whatever. I said, Miss Hudson, I got Miss Hudson. He's, oh, yes. Have you read? And he did his litany. And I said, no. He said, are you educated? Ooh. And he had another bag of books. Come on, people. And I had to each time I had to take a cab home with the books, right? And I began that reading, And I remember once, when Miss Hudson was ill.
Yeah, take your time.
I went over, she lived right near, right down on 135th Street over in those middle class, what I used to call the middle class. They had the low income and the middle class, right? And then they built the thing where my dad lived and Lennox Terrace, to keep us from getting housing downtown when they built all those big houses. And I said, what did you see in me that you took the time with me?
All right. Take your time.
And she said, I knew when you got up that third time and asked that question, I knew I saw in your eyes. She said, that's what we have to do. We have to nurture you young people. And that's why, we do. And that's why we nurture you. Most of the professors I know who are worth anything, that's what they do. They nurture these young people, They insist, like as Max said, we insist that you understand what we're saying. And if you give me crap, I'll give it back. But I never failed anyone. If eventually you kept giving me crap, I said, you need to drop the class. You can drop it past in WP, right? When you're ready, come back. Because what good was it for me to flunk somebody? You know what I'm saying? When you're ready, come back. And they show up 2 years later, and they come in contrite, and they come in, they sit down, and they learn. Because it's about what you teach, so they can learn. That's what this is all about, finally. But I just wanted to share that with you, because this woman, who was not a political woman, but she knew you could give her a picture, right? of a building in Harlem, and she could tell you who lived there. Du Bois lived there for a while, blah, blah. You know, Langston lived there for a while. I mean, all over. You know, she was that kind of person, but she also was the person that she said to me once in her house, she said, you know, they've never said, no one's ever said anything about me publicly, but she had done. You hear that? And so I was on Gil Noble's show once. I think she was still alive, or maybe she made transition. I'm not sure now. I think she was still alive. Oh, she was still alive. And he said, who are the people who influenced you, Sonia? And I did the usual suspects. You know, the people we all know. You would probably say from Malcolm, Martin, you know, whatever, Du Bois. And I stopped midair. I said, let me tell you about a woman by the name of Jean Hudson, you know, who finally fed me, you know, fed what I needed, whatever. By the time I got back home to Philadelphia, my telephone was ringing. And it was Miss Hudson. And she said, thank you, Sonia. No one has ever given me praise. Not that she wanted it, but she needed it. Everybody needs a little praise at some point. You know that, right? And that's what she did. That's what we did. And that's what that woman was all about. So therefore, when we began, when I was in a place called Mexico, and those brothers and sisters, all from SNCC, said, you know, we need you to come out and do this work. You know, I said, yeah. They said, but we're told you're the only one who has all these books. We can Xerox all these books. Not Xerox. Come on. Yeah. And that's what we did. So it was a continuity. It was a that was there because of this woman who was not involved with anything that we were involved with later on, but gave us. So therefore, when I'm in a place called San Francisco and I'm teaching black literature, and I'm teaching everybody from Robeson to Du Bois, you know. Can you hear that? And we are running it off, you know, whatever, chapter after chapter after chapter. That's why they start reprinting these books. Okay, chapter after chapter after chapter. I'm home a Wednesday, and my landlord knocks on my door and said, "Oh, Professor Sanchez, there are two men who would like to see you and talk to you." And I said, "Oh, you know, come in." And the guy said, "FBI." Now, one guy who stood to his left stood straight. He never looked at me. He just stared straight ahead. But this guy, one who said FBI, looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're teaching." And I jumped. Du Bois. He didn't say Du Bois the way we say Du Bois people. He said Du Bois, Hughes, Wright, Garvey. You know, and I people say, "Oh, you all was so hip, you knew everything." No, this is what I said. Oh yes, you cannot teach black literature without them. You know, come on, people, because that's where I was. I thought I am teaching black literature. What is seditious about that? See, I hadn't connected that at all, right, at the time. He was furious. You know, he just you're teaching, and I'm saying, you know, when you're in a foreign country, and like you don't speak the language, and they don't speak your language, and so you think if you speak slowly, so you say, "My name is I want to go." That's what I did with him. I am teaching, yes, because you cannot teach the Harlem Renaissance without Garvey. Now, if you're teaching the Harlem Renaissance without Garvey, you ain't teaching the Harlem Renaissance, you know what I mean? And I went through all of this like that, right? And this guy's looking at me like, what is wrong with her? Doesn't she understand that we have banned these people? You know, that some people say blackball, but I say we have whiteballed these people. And you cannot teach them, and they were not teaching them, but all of a sudden you young people without any sense of like the government decide to teach them, you know, and we are going to get you. We are coming to your house on a Wednesday, right, you know, to say simply at some point that, you know, whatever. But, you know, that's where I was standing, and I am trying to figure this out. I am only teaching black literature. What is wrong with this man? Whatever. I'm not connecting at all, period. But my next door neighbor, a Japanese American who raised Samoyeds, beautiful dogs, had given me this white dog. And he said, if you don't like the dog, in 2 weeks you can give it back. And I was on the beginning of the second week. And what I did with that dog is I would feed him. I never petted him. I come from New York. We didn't have room for a dog in New York City in our apartments. We could barely feed ourselves, much less a dog, right? But I fed that dog, and then he would walk me at night because he was big, right? But he said, you need a dog for protection, Professor Sanchez. I'll never forget it. And I just said, Well, after all this noise has happened, I heard these big feet come down the hallway. And Snow came and sat like this next to me. And I looked down and I said, oh, this dog, I got to get rid of this dog, what is this dog doing in my house, whatever. He's going to, eat me up eventually, right? And this man said again, literally got in my face, and Snow leaped for him. And he said, lady, get your dog. He reached into his pocket. And I said, Snow, and Snow sat back down, but he never took his eyes off that man. So I said at that point, I can't tell you anything else. Yes, I'm teaching black literature. Yes, I'm teaching those people. I'm supposed to be teaching them that. And I opened the door, they went out the door, period. But then I bit down and I touched that dog for the first time. I said, no, you're a good dog. I said, you're in a house of vegetarians. I am going to buy you a steak. And I did. What I'm saying at some point is that I then called Miss Hudson on the phone. And I cried. I said, Miss Hudson, what gives? She said, this woman, non-political woman, said, oh, my dear Sonia, I thought you understood that if you taught Du Bois or Hughes or Wright, you might have a little trouble. Little trouble, people. Big trouble. But the point is that what it did for me, I sat down that night and I revised how I taught my literature. Ooh, I revised how I taught it. Here I was, been trained to teach everything thematically. Come on, stay with me. And all of a sudden I began to talk about the sociology of this literature, the economics of this literature. So when I'm teaching the boys, I got to bring in what? Black Reconstruction, people. You began to move differently. And then I knew then that I was dangerous and seditious because I understood then that they had made me understand what I should have been doing. Yes. That's the way they trained me, but what I should have been doing all along when you teach literature or anything that you teach, period. That was that kind of thing. And in the midst of all of that, I was privileged then to teach people like Danny Glover, you know what I mean? And Danny began to act for the first time in Baraka's plays, right? And he was the only one who would then continue to be this actor. But he had a base of politics, though, when he went in to do his acting. That is what is so important for us to understand. But there we were, starting something, but we needed text. And all along, we began to write rapidly, or we would call people, you write something about this, I need it, I'm walking into my classroom one day, and one of the professors said, here's Sonia, we just found something in the research about Japanese Americans. It's saying concentration camps. I said, concentration camps? Are you sure? You're stopping, but you're rushing. And I get it, and I get in, and I say, I had 2 Japanese American students in my class. I said, someone just handed this to me. I said, it's information about concentration camps, that Japanese Americans were detained out here. And my 2 Japanese students, when you teach sometimes you can tread on dangerous waters with people, because you can get a student who will just go bananas on you. And one of them said, I've never heard of such a thing. I said, well, okay, maybe can I give this to you? You can take it home and ask. When I was in my classes joining hands, I do that, right? And they literally barely, touched the hand. They were angry. That following Tuesday, people, they walked into class and they told the story about their parents having been detained in a place called America, America. Right, and they told the story with tears in their eyes. And many years later, I'm in a place called Seattle, at the university there, and talking to more than 500 people, reading my poetry and talking. And this young Japanese American woman comes walking down. You haven't seen a student in years, and people look familiar. And she walks up on stage, and she just bursts through, and she says, Did you see my documentary on my parents and also on Japanese American? That's how the danger of black studies, come on. The danger of SOS is because, yeah, we talk to each other, black folks, but all of a sudden, here I am learning, then I'm bringing in Japanese American, then I'm talking about Jews in concentration camps, then I'm talking about Chicanos also too. Come on, that's what we did. I learned about Chinese. Someone said, look at this, Chinese building railroads, putting dynamite, whatever, and exploding yellows. What I'm saying is that once we began to talk about black stuff, then all the other colors came out at some point. And in the midst of everything, then this gay thing came up. And I am not a revisionist, because everybody and their mama laughed at gays. You know that. I'm on stages with people, and they say something, and they say, I go, whatever, etc. But then I had students who were obviously gay in my class, people, and we treated each other like human beings, and I insisted that people in that class do the same thing. So how can I be on stage because somebody else has said something, I'm going, like a little dunce, right? And one day, on stage, when they did it, I didn't do it. And I was the next speaker, and I said, at some point we have to move away from denigrating people. I was uninvited for about 2 years to everything black that people were doing, conferences. I showed up, and people said, why aren't you on stage? I said, because I was not invited to speak, because people had very specific ideas at that particular time, and they really, this is really blackball you, and then correct usage. I was blackballed at that point, whatever, because they said simply, you ain't gonna be up here talking that kind of talk. In fact, you're not gonna add, the litany of names that I do, you're not gonna add names, people that we know are gay people, to that litany of names. What I'm saying is at some point that we began to change things at some point, and there were battles, but make no mistake about it, real battles going on, that there were things that happened to you, but I didn't get up on stage and go crazy and say, let me tell you what's happening to me in the midst, because I understood that we had to work it out. We were trying to work this out amongst ourselves, and that was very important that we try to do that. But all of this, so therefore there's a piece that I do where I talk about always Queens of the Universe. It's really a wonderful piece. Then I talk about also, like at some point, under the direction of black men, whatever. There's a line there, and I read it now and I laugh, okay? But at some point, I knew why I was doing it also, too, because I didn't want to go off. I could have gone up and cleaned it up. I said, you don't clean stuff up. Whatever reason, you got to read it and understand why. Because people evolve. Because people change. If you think not, you're dead. Okay? You got to hear that, you see. And that's what this is all about. We're showing you people exactly where they were and then how they evolved also at that time. Because that's what this was all about at some point. And we have got to understand that and know that. So I wanted to just read, I have the intro to poetry in 3 sections. And this part is called meditation. Frantz Fanon said, what is needed is to hold oneself like a sliver to the heart of the world, to interrupt, if necessary, the rhythm of the world, to upset, if necessary, the chain of the command, ellipsis, but to stand up to the world. I do battle for the creation of a human world, that is a world of reciprocal recognition. Jose Marti wrote, in the world there must be a certain degree of honor, just as there must be a certain degree of light. When there are many men and women without honor, there are always others who bear in themselves the honor of many men and women. How to tell you of peace, change, hope, of racial and sexual and economic injustice, how of an America rising up out of an aristocracy of death, an aristocracy of slavery, racism, an aristocracy of color, an aristocracy of corporate greed, an America that made Langston Hughes write, we the people must redeem our land and make America, America again. How to tell you about lives running on hairpins, of a country needing parts from people to live. Step right up, I say step right up, a good sail on legs today, eyes today, hands today, kidneys today, hearts today, history, herstory today, integrity today, truth today, families today. How to tell you of a country that will not recognize the 2 most important revolutions that were rooted in a cultural base, Cuba and Haiti. These two countries symbolize a regional process of struggle and liberation of the mind, which must be an essential part of our journey towards the fulfillment of the Western integrity. How to tell you of progress. So we move beyond the politicians in Cuba and Haiti, and everyone has the automatic voice. Here's the automatic voice of Washington shouting communism, continuing the blockade, boat people, AIDS, poverty, but never the eloquent and graceful poetic voice of Martí, the spiritual father of the Cuban Revolution, who said, as he observed the conduct of the U.S. delegation in 1889 at the Monetary Congress of the American Republic, they believe, and I quote, they believe in need, in the barbarous right as the only right. This will be ours because we need it. Almost 100 years later, after an invasion of Grenada by 6,000 U.S. soldiers, the U.S. Secretary of State George Shultz arrived, and his first observation was complete. He said, "This is a delicious piece of real estate." How to tell you of walking, climbing the citadel in Haiti, and hearing the footsteps of a people, a country calling out for liberty, economic justice, equality, and change. How to really make you understand that it's the poets, as prophets, as teachers, as visionaries, as activists, as writers who sing of peace, racial and social and sexual and economic justice. How to make you remember Baraka in his 1965 poem, Black Art, declaring, "We want poems that kill ellipses. We want a black poem of a black world." Or Larry Neal's, "And there is this jail. America is the world's greatest jails, and we are all in jails. Black spirits contain little magnificent birds of wonder." How to make you remember James Baldwin, a man Baraka called God's black revolutionary mouth, who said in 1979 in a New York Times article, "If black English isn't a language, then tell me what is." And Baldwin said, "It goes without saying that language is the most novel and crucial key to identity. It reveals the private identity and connects one with or divorces one from the larger public or communal identity." Every 10 years they will call you about that, about black English. Is there such a thing? Refer them to that article. That's what I do now. You know, I don't explain it, and the article's in here. Just refer them to it, and you don't have to go. Every 10 years they say, "What is this thing about black English? Is there such a thing?" You know, refer them to the article or this book, whatever, and you're beyond that. Okay, hang up the telephone. Okay. How to make you hear your heart sounding, pounding out what W.E.B. Du Bois wrote. "This is a beautiful world. This is a wonderful America, which the founding fathers dreamed until their sons and daughters drowned it in the blood of slavery and devoured it in greed." How to make you remember the sister poets singing of the workers with words that had the scent of the earth and the genius of the stars. How to make you store in your blood the memory of black women's voices, Jordan, Fields, Cortez, Clifton, Evans, Fabio, Angelo, Lord, Giovanni, Rogers, Sanchez, linking continents, making the country and the world, abandoning closed minds, spreading themselves rainbow-like across seas. Their voices stalking the morning stars as they helped a generation of young people begin to question their silence, their poverty, their scarcity, their greed. They helped us all ask the most important question we could ask ourselves: what does it mean to be human in the 20th and 21st century? How to make you continue to lift your eyes off the ground into a higher ground of living, of being, loving. How to make you remember the poets coming behind us in 1989, Public Enemy, 1989, The Number, Another Summer, Get Down, Sound of the Funky Drummer, music hitting your heart, cause I know you got soul, gotta give us what we want, gotta give us what we need, hey. Our freedom of speech is freedom or death. We got to fight the power. That beat, let me hear you say it, fight the power.
Fight the power.
Louder.
Fight the power.
Again.
Fight the power.
Yeah. As James Stewart, a great critic, he's in here. You should read this article James Stewart did. It's an amazing article. As James Stewart, the black critic, wrote, "Man, woman cannot create a forever, but he can only create forever. But he can only create if he creates as change. Creation is the self-perpetuation. Change is being. The question of art is dialectical. Art goes. Art is not fixed. Art cannot be fixed. Art is changed like music, poetry, and writing are when concerned. They must move, sway, not necessarily as physical properties, but by their nature. but they must go spiritually. As we people, lovers and workers of change, must go out into this world spiritually. And if we do, eBay, yee, eBay, yee, eBay, eBay, yee, eBay, yee, it'll get better, it'll get better. It'll get better, So it's in three parts that I do, but I begin talking about the poets also too. Then I go into a critique of the poet as the creative social vice, a long essay that's cut in here that I did some years ago, and then I end up, with a poem, a praise to the black poets of that period, and to the black poets period. But that's what we were talking about and doing. Tell me my time. 1 minute. Thank you. Brother. But that's what we were doing, and not criticizing what other people do. Not at all. See, we didn't do that. But you have got to look up and wonder why people criticize this period constantly. You know why? Because when you travel in the world, when I went overseas and we hit London, the first thing they would ask me, "Oh, Professor Sanchez, did you bring Muhammad Speaks?" Even I jumped. They said, "That's the only newspaper that's giving us the news fit to be printed." I went, whoa, whatever. So every time you go, you bring in Muhammad Speaks, because it's in Muhammad Speaks that they first published what happened down in, when they were given the Tuskegee experiment, right? And no one believed it because it was in Muhammad Speaks, Isn't that amazing? Yeah. But I brought it into my classroom and read it. Let me tell you something's happening in the world, because I checked it out with some people also too. Boom, there we were, period. I'm just saying simply that in the world, it's like when Marcus Garvey did his black newspaper. That paper was banned, because people wanted that. It's the same kind of continuity that was going on. All I'm saying to you at some point is that the reason that we have gotten what we've gotten is because people worked for it. That people coming out of civil rights, segued into, in quotes, black studies, black power movement. They began to look differently at this country at some point, and they began to move accordingly. It does not behoove you to go and curse people. You don't curse people's work, okay? You don't curse people, If you do, and you hear people doing, then you have to ask, whom do you work for? Because you're not evidently working for the people, okay? I'm very serious about that now. That's a serious statement there, okay? Or it means that they think the only way they can get ahead is to destroy people. We said we're not a Jimmy Baldwin, and we're not Richard Wright, but they thought that they had to destroy Richard Wright, okay? You don't have to do that anymore. We can proceed accordingly, okay, together, move together, and understand that we're building on something here at some point, and what we're trying to build on is to save this bloody earth. That's what we're building on. That's because this earth is at risk, and it's at risk from people who denied that black arts was important. The same people denied that there's no such thing as a meltdown that's going on, Those are the same people, the same people who are saying at some point there's no climate change going on in America. The same people who would say constantly, well, we thought that boy had a gun. The same people, who would look up and say simply, okay, it's okay to kill that woman, whatever, because we thought she had a gun. Isn't that something? I said, no, she had breasts, Understand that SOS calling out is relevant. Because we are saying now, we are calling you, to the possibility that people really think that we're unnecessary. Because we don't really need you as a workforce.
Yes.
And someone said to me, well, I'm a professor. I said, And I'm a doctor. You're a nurse. And basic, I'm a teacher in the elementary school. Oh, welcome. Welcome to a club where people are getting fired also, too. Welcome to a school system that is not working. And we're saying, for it to work, you cannot sit on your behind, your derriere, your asses anymore. You've got to get up and become activists. If we look at the Congress that's going to come in now, listen to me. And I put a call in that we're going to go sit in the Congress down there and tell those people, go home if you don't like us. Go home if you're going to not vote. Go home if you're going to filibuster. Go home. We want a democracy really happening here. And at some point, we've got to write our president, and we've got to say to our president, don't put those foot soldiers on the ground there. Do not do that. It's bad enough with sitting those little, right? Okay. But don't send them, because if you do, just watch this next election that will come up at some point. You got to, at some point, say we got a black president, whatever that means, whatever, etc. We've got to finally say, you do have a backup. Some of y'all remember when he first got elected, and I was here, and I said on stage, we need to write him and tell him, you really do need a cabinet, a black and Latino cabinet, whatever. Because remember when, what's the sister's name?
Bethune.
No, remember when the sister...
Sherrod.
Remember Shirley Sherrod? I was on the road.
Yes.
Yeah, Shirley Sherrod, in quotes, got fired, axed, right? Because supposedly, she maltreated a white farmer. Remember that?
Yes.
I'm on the road and I get up, and I hadn't read it. Sometimes you get, and after I had talked, someone raised hands, Professor Sanchez, tell me about this Shirley Sherrod, the president has fired her, NAACP came out against her, whatever. I said, who? I said, that can't be. They said, why not? Come on, people. You need a cabinet. Because if you had called someone, they would have told you, Shirley Sherrod. And Stokely said black power. Charlie and Shirley said, we're staying here, doing what we've been doing all along. So it's out of character. You knew Shirley would not have done it. You hear that? But you need people who have been around, who have a history and a history with them, so they would not have been embarrassed. The NAACP would not have been embarrassed. The urban, all these other people say, oh, she's terrible. No, she's not. Then they offer her a job again. She said, you keep your job, okay? Understand what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that in here, you will see connections that you never thought about, from the civil rights on to black studies, on to black power. But above all, the connection is that understanding. I don't care where you be. If you got $100,000, $200,000, you're still black. Malcolm said that, and you can lose it. You can lose it. And if you lose it, where you going to go to? Okay, that's important.
Well, on that note.
Okay, thank you. I'm so sorry.
We got 15 minutes for questions.
Okay, got questions. Thank you.
Are you guys going to the lunch?
Yeah, we're going to go to lunch.
All right, so
Yeah.
so they did ask me to make sure we had some time for questions. I really do, feel.
No, you shouldn't. You should stop me. Right.
Okay, well, I will follow my directions.
But I just want to testify what you guys have done, John and Sonia. This is such a blessing.
Yes.
To all of us. We need this turn to the arts and the culture because we were constantly reinventing ourselves.
Exactly.
And that's what blackness is all about.
Yeah.
Reinvention. And
Can I say something instead of
get us the
reinvention?
documents to show the reinvention.
Can I suggest a word other than reinvention? Because I always get a kind of funny feeling, but we have had to reimagine ourselves in this American landscape. Reimagine. We had to reimagine ourselves here. Every time they did something to us, we said, well, okay, now what do we do now? So we reimagine ourselves here, and we keep going. It's amazing how we do it. Thank you, my dear sister. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I wanted to comment. I was so touched by your story, and I heard you speak on it before about Gene Hudson. And it's so touching because having experienced that, I went from Chicago to Los Angeles, and then Dr. Mawala Karenga did that to us. So we at this school never had a black student union.
Right.
And he shows us how to do it.
Exactly.
He had the nerve to think we are important enough to show us.
Go on. Yes.
And so later when I went back to Chicago and I spent 23 years on 103rd on the south side working with little kids, I had, I felt important because Dr. Karenga took some time with us. Francis Cress Welsing Harold X took some time with us and told us some stuff that made us feel it was important.
Exactly.
But then when I went to graduate school, and this is the reason that I wanted to really ask you about this, and hopefully you all can respond. I didn't have nobody to show me nothing. I wasn't in the Black Studies department. I was in the Department of Education. But I was at school.
Right.
When I came home, I had decided to work with these little drive-by shooters, and I was committed to that. But at the school that I attended, Gwendolyn Brooks was there. And so we would teach these kids, we real cool and stuff like that, so that they could begin to speak more clearly and confidently in job interviews. And so, but nobody showed me or told me that all of that time, the 23 years I spent with those little kids, that I should have been getting a PhD. Nobody grabbed my hand and helped me. And so when I speak about a thing like this, I'm speaking for the kids that are coming up in the classes and the people who are assembled in this room. Grab somebody's hand.
Right.
Because we don't know unless you show us.
That's right. Thank you, my sister. Thank you, my sister.
I am so moved.
Take your time.
I feel like I'm in church.
You are. Right.
It's all right.
A lot of times, as an actress and an educator, I feel like I'm by myself.
Don't. I'll give you my number. You can always call me. Okay? I'm serious.
I want to sit at the feet of the elders and be blessed.
You got to.
Why is it that we don't understand that? And I look at the musicians and they honor the musicians. They understand it. But poets don't honor poets.
Yeah.
Writers don't honor writers.
Some do.
We've got to, and I understand that, but I'm saying coming from Little Rock, Arkansas Central High School, working 15 years.
Ooh.
And not being understood, and my principal putting her foot on my back. And I'm saying,
You should.
I'm looking for my Jesus.
You should invite us. I remember when what is that program? There's a program where the sister is the head detective. It's been on for 20 years, 15 to 20 years. What's her name? Apatha. Right.
Yeah.
And she had mentioned to someone that she had trouble. She was having trouble, on the show, right? Well, someone said, okay, Toni Morrison, another sister, myself, we showed up one day on the shoot, right? And we walked in and said, Patha invited us to come, and we shook everybody's hands, and we sat there and we followed everything around. We went with everything. They got off our back, we showed up on purpose so we can show up places, and we do show up places, But above all, we need to do what we always used to do. Our dear brother said he called sister. Gwen, because we give out our telephone number. Gwen gave out our telephone number. I do too, My children complain bitterly. They say, it's an unlisted number, Mom. And I said, I know. But when you hear someone saying something, you got to be there. And I always say, if I'm not there, leave a message, but I will get back to you. Whatever. Because you can't ignore a call for help. Yeah. You can't say, oh, you'll get by. You won't get by. Yeah. If it's just talking to someone or saying, what do I read or what do I do? Or when you come out and just visit and walk into a classroom. We used to walk into classrooms, especially with my younger assistant professors, who were being reviewed by people, right? You show up and the moment the person was reviewing the person and she was in trouble because she taught well and what she should have taught, I'd be sitting in the back and I'd ask questions like, did you really think blah, blah, blah? And you put people on pause. I love that word from the hip-hop generation. Listen to say, you put someone on pause. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, they know what they're talking about. I put the person who was going to write a negative thing about, but something I didn't mention earlier, I was telling John about this. I said, there were divisions when people came up for promotion and for tenure. Sometimes I would get written letters from heads of departments because they knew that the person who was up was against the black arts people. Serious. So I get this letter like, we think you love to write, a letter about blah, 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 blah. And I know what that person has said about me and Barack and everybody else, right? Would you write? I said, oh, yes. They expected me to write a letter that would, knock them down. I wrote a letter that said, yes, not only should he be this, but he should be promoted, whatever, etc. They call it like, Professor Sanchez, it was, I said, yes, isn't he a fine poet? You can't make me divide people, I don't care how he writes, what he thinks, whatever, that's not the point, The point is how I think,
Exactly.
That why shouldn't he get tenure? Why am I going to be part of, again, you cannot, and this sister who used to teach at, she was back there with the older poets, I'm blanking on her name, University of Maryland, who very distinctly said, like these people writing, not saying anything. I get a letter, and they called writing me to help promote her. We know you will give what you should say about her. And I said, Gloria Odin. I sat down and quoted in that thing Odin's poetry, whatever. I got a call and said, you really do know her work. Listen to that. I said, oh, yes, I do know her work. I would read her poem every now and then in my classroom. What they were saying is that if I can keep you divided, you don't let that happen, people. You don't move in such a way. You don't move. And I'm trying to make you understand when I give an assignment, like for 1 week, do not say anything negative about anybody. Come on, because I got to lead you along this path that says simply, if that person has struggled, gotten that degree, work, is not killing anybody, let her get tenure, whatever. But write her a letter and say, let me give you this letter that I wrote for you. So she will, and he will understand what you're doing, okay? And that's what I did. I wrote the letter. I got a call and said, Sonia, I want to thank you for this. I said, yeah, maybe we can have lunch together sometimes. I mean, you cannot let people make you like them, okay? Yeah. But you got to teach them also that this is all about business, people. And you deserve a gig like everybody else, deserve a gig. You cannot let that happen. So I'm serious.
And it's the title of the book. The thing is, it's calling all black people. It doesn't say some black people, a few black people.
The ones that think like me or him or you.
It's calling all black people.
So I think, brother with the blue shirt on, I think we'll go.
Yes, I do.
I really thoroughly enjoyed this. My name is Ron Hurd on We All Be News. And I love Coltrane. He's popular saxophone tendencies. Coltrane, Eric Dolphy, and Albert Allen.
Come on.
And somebody who I think is very much the unsung, he's the Marcus Garvey of black music to me, is Sun Ra. Reimagined everything.
Sunrise in here. Sunrise in here. Yeah.
And there's going to, but the question I want to ask you all is, how has white supremacy or Jim Crow benefited black expression? How has it elevated? Has it helped black creativity? And also, before I go, this on behalf of this room, I want to present you for award, Sister Sanchez. You are a national treasure. You are a true phenomenon. And the words of the great Duke Ellington, you are beyond category and without comparison.
Thank
this
you.
is my humble effort, the 2014 We All Be part of this Lifetime Achievement Award.
Oh, my God. Thank you.
We have a student who just finished a dissertation on Sun Ra and Fela Rasakuti.
That's right.
Part of what we do in our department is we have, the Du Bois department. We're in a disciplinary department, right? We know people have to get jobs in particular categories, but we train, we have a major works course, which is like 100 books over 3 semesters. And the literature people do history, the history people do literature. Because in fact, you don't live yourself in categories. And so the whole point is we want people to move toward those spaces that put things together rather than say, I only do, Emily Dickinson's third poem and that kind of stuff, and that's what the field was. That's why we had Black Studies in the first place, just to put everybody in one space. So that Max Roach is next to me. Nelson Stevens over here, who did the cover, is down the hall, right? Mike Delwell's down the other end of the hall. Chet Davis's education is down the other end of the hall. We are unified people. We are unified subjects, right? We're just not economic black and political black and so forth. We are a people. And we should be studied in our holistic self. Now the White Academy now is onto that. It's more interdisciplinary and synergy and all that. We did that 40 years ago.
Yeah.
That's what we did 40 years ago. Now they discovered there should be interaction between the disciplines. We say you don't need disciplines. You know, we need black people as our subject, and we'll look at them any way we want together. Right now, this is a new thing in the academy, and you can get money for doing interdisciplinary work and cooperating across lines. And when we did it, they said, y'all just spreading confusion. You don't have any training. You don't have the proper training. No. We had the training that they wish they had, right? Because they don't understand. That's why the people in this country don't know anything. You study the economy separate from the politics, you don't know about either one.
Exactly.
Right? You know, and then literature's over there somewhere, but some of the greatest economic writing is in the literature. You understand Chicago better reading Native Son than you do reading the study from the Urban League about Chicago, you know, how many people got a house that don't have a house. You know, you can't understand the world without the art that explains the world.
Yeah.
Great art moves you through the world. Right? Great art can say stuff that you can feel, but you can't quite get it out. Right? You know, so great art can take a ugly building and make it beautiful so you can get through the day. You know, rather than seeing the side of something with graffiti on it, you have a mural. Right? Or you have tagging, which takes the graffiti and takes that into art. Right? That's what art does. You know, it gives you beauty when people don't want you to have beauty, and it opens up a way that beauty can be anywhere. So you're not stuck somewhere. You know, and that's that whole thing about, you know, the reinvention, reimagination thing. If we just sat here, you know, when we got here and just sat around and scratched our heads and said, oh, woe is me, we'd still be on a plantation somewhere. Right? The one thing that came out of the 19th century culture that everybody acknowledges as the supreme form of American culture is spirituals. We don't even know who wrote them. You name me one great work of Southern culture done by white people in the 19th century. But what slaveholder that did anything you want to read or see or look at? Right? One thing. You can't name me one book, one painting, one anything, right? But if I say nobody knows the trouble I've seen, y'all know the next line. Right? Right? Anonymous black people, right, who were not named, could not be named, produced in the middle of slavery, culture that swept the world. Right? Kids up in the Bronx without any music in the school, took away all the instruments. But I don't need that. I got some vinyl and I got a turntable. I'm gonna give you some. I'm gonna get James Brown. I'm gonna get you some. I can't play a trumpet, but I can hear a trumpet sound, and so I'll scratch me a little trumpet sound over here. I'll scratch me some saxophone. Right? They made hip hop out of no instruments. They thought they had us. They said, no, you're not going to have music. We're taking away the horns. They said, no, we got the sound. We'll get the sound where we can make it from. Right? Now that is the sound of the world. Hip-hop is 40 years old. 40 years old. It lasted longer than bebop. It certainly lasted longer than doo-wop, which is my favorite. It lasted 5 years. Right? You know, bebop, you know, hip-hop is 40 years old and has swept the world. You know, in Spady's latest book, The Global Cycle. Right. You go to any place and there's Icelandic hip-hop, there's Israeli hip-hop, there's Pakistani hip-hop. These are black kids out of the Bronx with no music training, right? No instruments in the school. No theory of music that had transformed the culture of the world, right? You cannot keep us down because we understand how the modern world works, because you dragged us into this thing first, right? That's why people look to us. You know, we're not a backwards looking people.
Right.
We're not, you know, we draw on the back. You know, that's why hip hop samples. You see, you dig the elders, but you build on the elders because this thing is new and we got to figure it out. And we figure it out. Everybody says, well, what do black people do? You notice everybody follows what we do? Right? They say, how do you live on the bottom? Well, look at black people. They know. They've been down there all the time. Right? You know, that's why young white kids like hip hop, because they, you know, Eminem said, look, I ain't doing so well in Detroit either. Right? So Elvis Presley can't help him. Right? You know, Britney Spears can't help him. Right? He got to go to hip hop to understand that world. Right? We're still the ones that interpret the world for everybody. We're still the ones. And we see things nobody else can see. We see the openings. Right? We see the beauty where there is no beauty, you know. But there's not a break. That's why this, you know, SOS leads into that. We don't cut it off in 1966 and there's no more black art. Stop dead does no more black art. No. We got Spady in here making that connection, bringing it on down, you know. And to show you the power of that, you know, who went to Ferguson? Right? Who are the people that get locked up? One of our grad students, Rosa Clemente, and who did she almost get killed with? Jessica Campbell and Talib Kweli. They didn't have to go. Defenders of the dream. These are artists who make a lot of money as artists. Why are they facing, you know, National Guard people with guns in their face? Because they believe what they say. They're not just rapping to be rapping. The values that they are talking about when you hear them is what they believe. So I think Jessica's got a little kid. I said, Jessica, what were you doing? She said, if I'm true to what I'm saying, I gotta go. You gotta go. You know, it's not a show. This is not about a show. This is not about trying to get tenure. This is not about can I get to Carnegie Hall, right? These are the values of people that people acted on, right? And it's going to get carried through, and I think it will. I think there's something coming now. I think the ground is shaking. I think that's why white people start shooting people a lot more, because we're not behaving no more. You know, and that's when the system, they can feel that. You know, women ain't in place no more.
Yep.
You know, men hate women because women don't obey.
Right.
You know, sisters are moving, brothers are moving. Young black people say, look, it's going to cost you more than a bullet next time you shoot a black man. Like Michael Brown cost him millions of dollars. Millions of dollars. It wasn't just a couple of bullets. That's what it used to be. Trayvon Martin is a couple of bullets. Right? Them other people they shot, we don't know their names, there's a couple of bullets. This cost them a whole millions and millions of National Guard and all kind of stuff. Police all over the country trying to figure out, we don't want this to happen to here. Right? That brother's life cost them. Right? So they're going to think about doing that again. They're going to think about it. That's what the movement is. And art, if art can't explain that, you know, which you will, look to the art, look at what the rappers are doing. Right, you know, look at the young people. You know, read this, but see it as the foundation that's helping us move through a world in transition. Right, don't go back and say I want to do it this way. You know, just like you don't want to go back and be Charlie Parker. Right, Coltrane was Coltrane. Charlie Parker was Charlie Parker. You know, Sonia Sanchez is Sonia Sanchez. Jessica Care Moore is Jessica Care Moore. Right, so you're looking forward. You know, we're not trying to go back, because our going back is not anywhere we want to go to. Right, we want to see how can we make a new world. You know, we have to have it in our head. We can make a new world. Right, and the SOS is the same thing. We got to call all black people. Like, you can't be well, I don't talk to him. He's from Ghana. I don't talk to him. Well, he's from the Dominican Republic. We know how they are. No. These are black people. White people encourage that crap.
Yeah.
You know, well, how come you don't get along with Africans? I get along fine with Africans. I have no problem with Africans. The more Africans, the better. That's more black people coming. You know, the original black people. You can't get no blacker than that. Right? I think there's 1 million Nigerians. I hope they bring 2 million. Right? That's another 1 million black people. I don't care what they think they are in Nigeria when they show up here. They black people. They ain't white. They can't move to no white suburb. They live in the hood. Their kids got their hats on backwards. Right? You know, they black. You know, all black people. That's why we put it on the cover. SOS. Right? This is a distress call. SOS. Right? Swim or sing. Save our ship. Save ourselves. Calling all black people. Like, when you hold this up, put it on your coffee table. People say, what does that SOS stand for? Well, if you're not, save yourself, save ourselves. That's why we have it. This is symbolic. We could have picked a lot of poems. Could have picked a lot of titles. This is the one. We're calling ourselves back to ourselves so we can move forward.
Yes. Right.
You know, that's what this is all about.
We want to get our guests to the luncheon, and that's going to start here in just a couple of minutes. So we'll just take one more question.
When are they signing?
We are signing.
Oh, yeah, we'll sign. Yeah.
But outside. Okay, outside.
Okay, well, we can sign right here if you want.
Okay.
Is someone coming in here?
No, there's
in this room?
lunchtime. There's a lunchtime.
Okay, then we'll sign here. Okay.
Last
Yes.
question.
First of all, Sonia, I remember you from Queens College, 1968.
Oh, yeah.
I'm the founder. My name is Joan Cartwright. I'm the founder of Women in Jazz South Florida, a global organization that promotes women musicians, women's voices in music. Not just the ones that get up on stage and take their clothes off, but the ones that play instruments and write music. I am the only woman in the world with a jazz and blues song book. And no one has contested me about this. But please, if you didn't get this, I got a few more left. And please, Mr. Hurd mentioned all the great jazz men. Mary Williams was an arranger for Duke Ellington.
Exactly.
I wrote a paper, Blues Women, the first civil rights workers. It's online at my Diva JC channel on YouTube. I'm reading it. We must
you mentioned Abby in there, right?
Step out and support women musicians. You don't see them in the festivals. That means they're not making the money. NEA, your tax dollars paid for 134 Jazz Master Awards through NEA.
Okay. I'm sorry, we're going to have to cut it. We're running out of time. So, appreciate it. Thank you very much.
It is.
Say that we are going